Hey guys, it's Mathel here, and welcome to the Crit Voltaxic build guide, I suppose you'd call it, for the Talisman character, which is a ranger and is now level 92. To see gameplay of this build, check out one of the two previous videos to this one, which includes Uber Atziri and the Vinktar's Square. This character is currently level 92 and has 4600 life. It has been set up at the moment specifically to deal with Uber Atziri, but this can take down every single map and pretty much every boss in the game, as well as hard map mods and all that. So to get straight into the guide itself, what we use is a Voltaxic bow. The entire build basically revolves around the Voltaxic and its lightning damage being converted to chaos. All of the damage from the build comes from the lightning damage on the Voltaxic, the lightning damage from your Wrath, and the lightning damage from the Lynx. So you have about 1,000 in total from all of those together. Delete. And all of that gets converted to chaos and then scaled through weapon elemental damage on things like jewelry, belt, quiver, as well as crit and then crit multi. On top of that, we have a bit of projectile nodes, which also scale your damage, and chaos damage nodes, which scale your damage after the fact, after it gets converted. So the way this all works is weapon elemental damage will scale your lightning before the conversion, and then it all gets converted into chaos. Chaos damage scales your damage after the conversion, and in total, chaos damage ends up being roughly the same thing as lightning damage, roughly the same thing as projectile damage. So all of those are really good, and this type of jewel is a good example of what you're looking for in a jewel for all the sort of damage types. Of course, projectile damage will also affect the phys damage that you do barely any of. So physical, basically not important at all for this build. You do pretty much none. Almost all of your damage is strictly chaos. So you turn on your Wrath, and as you can see, we gain another boatload of chaos damage. Currently I'm running Herald of Thunder, so that boosts me up a bit more just for lightning to chaos, and then you can use your Herald of Thunder attached to Curse on Hit and Assassin's Mark to help out some cursing and sustain some power charges. On top of that, I also have Frenzy attached to Curse on Hit, just for some single target curse action, which I rarely use, but it's mostly for Uber Atziri runs. So through all of that, we scale our damage with weapon elemental damage, primarily. That's your most important gem link. For Lightning Arrow, it's kind of also, GMP, Chain, those are your main four. Then you use Added Lightning, then you go with Void Manipulation. Void Manipulation is a pretty damn good gem, gives you more chaos damage after the fact, and it's your sixth link in both cases. For Blast Rain, we use Blast Rain, then you will go with Weapon Ele damage, Conk Effect, Poison, Added Lightning, and then Void Manipulation. So with all of that, Blast Rain is completely insane because it has so many more sort of multipliers that it just scales the tooltip absurdly. And as you can see here, it's hitting for about 10k, 11k chaos per hit, and it hits 3 or 4 times. Looks like about 3. And on top of that, it's got, or my build currently has, 460 crit multi. So on average, we're going to be hitting for something like 40,000, 50,000 chaos damage several times over, stacking with the poison, which scales off of your chaos damage. It just ends up giving the best single target I've ever had in this game. And you can see that in previous videos like the Uber Atziri run, where you just trivialize the content by killing things instantly with your single target damage. Lastly, you can use Herald of Ice instead of Herald of Thunder if you want a more reliable power charge generation through clearing maps, but for something like Uber Atziri runs, I found Herald of Thunder was the best thing to use for generation and for cursing. Aside from that, you leave 25% mana unreserved and sustain entirely off of 0.4% mana leech, which I took as a hybrid node, life and mana leech. Originally, I was going to get Essence Sap or Spirit Void, but as I was leveling up, I found that 0.4% mana leech was sustaining me completely. Now, I have a 6-link mana cost of 59 on Lightning Arrow, and that means I kinda can't really spam. So my mana won't regen fast enough even when hitting large packs, that you just shoot a few times, you usually one-shot the pack. By that point you'll regen some mana and then you'll move on. So you can't really truly spam unless you put up Val Clarity, which is one of my 2 Val skills I'm using, in conjunction with Val Haste. That lets you pop both of them, usually for boss fights or large packs, and then you can spam completely freely. And Blast Rain you can pretty much always spam because it's fairly cheap and you'll get your mana back rather quickly as long as you're hitting something. The point being, 0.4% mana leech is roughly all you need for this build and for the sustain. We have no other mana regen, no other mana specific passives, just get the 0.4% mana leech. As well as that, we have 1.2, 1.6, 2% leech, which doesn't need to come from your gem, it's just plain 2% leech. Now that replaces your life leech gem entirely, and that affects your chaos 100%. So all of this has the 2% life leech applied to it, and I'm also using Valpact to give that completely instant leech back. So as long as you're hitting something with your Blast Rain, you are basically going to sit at 100% life no matter what. That's how strong your leech is. Especially if you pair it with an Atziri flask, which gives you an extra 2% leech, meaning you will be leeching 4% during the duration of this flask. Flask also gives you quite a large damage boost, which is very handy. So Atziri Flask, highly recommended for this build. My golem choice is of course Ice Golem. He gives me a large amount of accuracy and crit, which boosts me up to 46% crit unbuffed. With power charges I go up to about 55, not too important. 45 is about where I'm at. That could be higher if I had diamond rings and some crit on my neck, a bit more crit on the quiver, but ultimately you're not going to get much higher than say 50% crit. That should be a goal, I suppose. Get rid of the golem because he usually makes a lot of noise. Right, what else do we mention? One of the other things you get is a static electricity jewel. You only really have room for 1 in this build. Static electricity is nice to have, but it's not like the be-all end-all. Static electricity here is worth 1 to 92 lightning damage, and it's roughly worth the same as this 3 damage jewel. So it's just like a cheap 3-prop jewel, essentially. It gives you about the same amount of damage, which is about 2 to 3k as this jewel. So do not move heaven and earth to fit as many static electricities into your build as possible, because ultimately so much of your damage is coming from the added lightning, the bow itself, and wrath. Now the passive tree itself, it's changed a bit to get a bit more life. In the end I think I'm about 150%. I felt like I needed that strictly for Uber Atziri, which was the spears on Atziri herself. Without this extra buffer of life, I was getting one-shot. You don't need that much life for this build, as you are unaffected by Reflect, and you can attack fairly safely from a large distance. On top of that, we do get some run speed, and then you just move around for all sorts of crit, all sorts of life, bow crit. It's a pretty, I think, generic bow crit build, or passive tree. Get a bit of evasion. I start as a ranger because these projectile nodes are really nice, and I do go over here because these, I've deemed them worthy of getting. Of course, you can start as a shadow as well, which you'll go through either the chaos nodes or the elemental nodes. Not too sure what's right. It'd probably go the chaos nodes just because it also increases that little bit of fizz, and you have a 12 life bonus there. As well as that, the chaos nodes will help to benefit your poison gem. If you start as a Scion, you just go over here for attack speed. Little less worth it, but you can do it. Also does open up 30 crit multi if you feel like getting it. You can start as a duelist as well, but of course no one wants to do that. But you do that there if you did. I did get Master of Arena for a while, but once you get into Valpact, you get rid of it and it's not needed. Something to mention about Charisma, if you want to use Charisma to squeeze in another Herald, so if you want both Herald of Thunder and Herald of Ice, you grab Charisma and you will run an Enlightened Gem to pull that off. You'll only be able to pull this off to unreserve about 20% of your mana with a good level Enlightened Gem, which I think would be level 3 or 4. So not a cheap option, and probably not even that worth doing, so keep that in mind. As for the gear itself, I've gone pretty heavy DPS oriented because I do have Malagaras and I do have a Rat's Nest. If you're playing hardcore, you might skip one of these or even both and just go for life options, get about 5k life, that'll be fine. But Malagaras are pretty amazing because they give you a large amount of crit and a large amount of crit multi, something that the build kinda needs since Voltaxic itself only has 6 crit. Rat's Nest I find really hard to not use on bow builds because it's so good for them. Large crit, large evasion, large attack speed, and some movement speed. What more could you ask for? So if you do skip one of these items, it's entirely up to you, but don't expect to hit the same sort of DPS numbers. Quivers are really easy to find that are good. The primary stats you're looking for in a quiver are spike point quiver, so a crit base, elemental, weapon elemental damage, and crit multi. That's what you really need to be looking for. Crit's nice, but ultimately it is worth so much less on a quiver. Same with attack speed, same with elemental damage. So try and get weapon elemental damage, crit multi, and then life if you can, craft life if you can't, if you don't have life on the quiver. But ideally you're looking for those 3 stats. Wed, crit multi, and life. That's going to be your biggest damage boost. Same with a neck. Crit multi will be absolutely your biggest damage boost, followed by weapon early damage. Try and get both if you can. Ultimately, you're going to want an int neck because the build is so int heavy for Wrath. Mine's level 21, so it's a 159 int investment. You're going to need int on a lot of items, namely your jewelry pieces, unless you end up going up this way. You do save yourself about 20 int, but I've deemed this not particularly worth doing at my point. Anyway, priority here is crit multi, weapon elemental damage, then life, then lightning damage to attacks. So it's pretty easy to buy a neck with just crit multi and wed, and then crafting some life onto it. That's not a hard ask at all. This thing over here cost me something like 20 chaos, and it's pretty damn nice. I can't even remember how much I paid for this, but it's pretty damn nice. A big top tier lightning roll like that is going to be worth roughly the same as a weapon elemental damage roll, so keep your options open by looking for both. Rings. Weapon elemental damage, I would aim for at least 30 on your rings. My rings are where I fill out most of my resists for this build. Not ultimately. Optionally, you can also get more resists on your quiver, but you'll probably be sacrificing a DPS slot or 2 to do so. The weapon elemental damage is very good, accuracy is very good, but you don't really need it. As you can see, with 0 accuracy on my gear and a golem up, I have 88% accuracy on a level 92 character. So a bit more accuracy would be nice, but not essential. And then you want some int, resists, life. Once again, a lightning damage roll will be about the same as a huge wed roll, but a little bit worse. So ideally you want some wed. Boots are a very high source of resists for the build, so try and get max movement speed, a couple of resists at least, with some life. I bought these boots without life. They were pretty cheap, something like 10, 20 chaos. People don't value boots like that too highly because you can only roll up to 64 life, so that's one of the cheap options out there. Otherwise, just see if you can buy yourself some boots with 2 sorts of resists, life, movement speed, and then you can craft a 3rd resist on. Just look for some budget options. A belt like this was also fairly budget, cost me about 20 chaos. It was just look for high life, high weapon elemental damage, and resists if you can squeeze them on. For a chest, I ended up going a rare evasion chest because I need high life and I need to fill out my resistances. Other options are Belly of the Beast and a Lightning Coil, but Lightning Coil will really stress your gear for resistances. So that is more of a hardcore option and an option if you're dropping either Malagaris or a Rat's Nest. But ultimately, I just bought a white 6-link. This was a Sharkskin Tunic, eye level 73, it cost me 3 exalts. Ideally, you want at least 1 6-link and put your blast rain into that 6-link. Because your single target is going to be your most important link factored skill. The more links you have in your blast rain, the quicker you can kill the hard things that are threatening to you. Having your lightning arrow on a 5-link is all that's really necessary. I played with a 5-link for most of the game on my lightning arrow. And it also actually makes it a bit easier in your mana. But your clearing skill only really needs to be on a 5-link, that's plenty. Make sure you try and get your blast rain on a 6-link, if you can get a 6-link. If you can't, your 5-link's going to do just fine as well. Take out your void manip and you're still going to absolutely annihilate things. What else we got? I'm a little uncapped on fire resist at the moment. I could change that by just getting a different quiver. But I've been doing Uber Atziri like 30 runs now without capped fire resist because I avoid all the damage that's going to come at me that's fire, which is primarily just flame blasts. So it's very expected damage, and I use a ruby flask to top that up when need be. This is basically the end game passive tree for me. Follow it if you like. If you want some more DPS, you can drop a few of these nodes. Acrobatics, I don't have that, and there's not really any good reason to not have it. For 2 points, it's fairly worth it. It's just that I have gone this long without having it, and I don't really die to things that I can prevent. So acrobatics is just going to be an extra chance to dodge a one-shot that I can't prevent anyway. So I chose to not take it. Up to you if you want to. It's pretty good for 2 points though. Aside from that, there's not too much else to say. Make sure you get a freeze immune flask, a bleed immune flask, an instant life flask, very nice as well. Add jewels, for the most part, if you can, get jewels exactly like this one. Life, projectile damage, lightning damage, they're really hard to come by now. I managed to pull out a couple of sort of similar ones, but they're not very common at all. Just aim for projectile damage and lightning damage, those are pretty damn common. And then any third stat, if you can get it, like a chaos, like some attack speed, life, etc. That's all going to be very beneficial. I think we pretty much covered it all. Blood Rage quality is fairly nice, and I use Blood Rage just for frenzy charge upkeep. I map pretty much exclusively without Valpact. I'm taking Valpact only for Uber Atziri, so up to you if you want to take Valpact or not for general mapping. But bear in mind it makes Blood Rage just a bit less comfortable running around with. To turn it off, you just take it in and out whenever you need to. Grab yourself a mirror arrow if you have never used one. It's basically just a decoy. Throw it out whenever you want a boss to be tanked by something. It's very handy for the trio, for example. Throw out your decoy, they'll attack it, and you just sit there and nuke them down. And Blast Rain paired with King of the Hill is actually super defensive and very strong. Almost borderline overpowered, I would say. Other than that, try and get your Wrath to 21. It's not that important, but it's a few, like extra 30 lightning damage or something. Added lightning as a 21 is also kind of a big deal. It's like an extra 40 lightning damage. Besides that, the rest aren't terribly important. Quality on each gem is worth about the same, roughly 10% damage, or one normal passive node. Quality on chain, not important at all. Quality on lightning arrow, not important at all. And GMP, as many arrows as possible is what you're going for your clear skill. GMP is going to be much better than LMP if that's what you're using. And chain, I feel, with lightning arrow gives you the best possible clear speed. Now my DPS over here is fully buffed, that is with a golem and with my frenzies and power charges. To hit my level of DPS, you must make sure you have weapon elemental damage on your rings. You must make sure you have crit multi on your amulet, on your quiver. You're using Malagaris, you're using Rat's Nest, you have leveled gems, there's quality on your gems. You have the 5, the 6 links, and that you have decent jewels. As well as that, you must be fairly high level, just to be able to fill out all of your passives. So please don't wonder why you haven't hit my DPS if you don't have all of these things completed. And lastly, as I said, my DPS is with the 6 frenzy charges up. Now my bandits are over here as well, and anything else. Over here it does mention my links. They are in order of importance, so usually the last one you put in is Void Manipulation. That is all I can think of that needs to be done for this guide. It has been an absolutely amazing character for me to play, and probably one of the strongest DPS and overall characters I've ever built. Thanks to Voltaxic's chaos damage, it's just been incredible this patch. It has provided me with some of the best Uber farming I've ever done, thanks to its very large single target through Blast Rain and Poison. Don't be discouraged if you kind of suck at Uber Atziri to start with. I absolutely did as well. It takes a bit of practice to take down Uber Atziri with a build like this, where you do a good chunk of dodging, running around, and playing around the boss's abilities. I bricked a few sets before I got it, but nowadays I can do every single set without fail. Quite a lot of them are deathless as well. So practice makes perfection, something like that. Don't be discouraged if it sucks the first few times. This has been the Crit Voltaxic character on Talisman Softcore. I am Mathel. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys have fun playing the build, and I'll see you next time.